working very hard at improving sportsmanship for all of our member schools. We've dealt with a number of issues over the years and continue to do whatever we can to try to promote sportsmanship. So I think that's my main message to you tonight, is that we need to continue to work on sportsmanship in the sports of boys and girls basketball. As you guys will not be surprised, and I say this every year, we have a shortage of officials. And when you look around your own boards, one thing you're going to notice is the age of many of the officials that are still going out there and doing games, and the lack of younger officials who are coming along to fill those spots, as older officials begin to retire and leave the profession. So we are at a crisis point. We are at a point here where we need to take this very seriously and do whatever we can to make sure we ensure ourselves a next generation of basketball here in the state of Connecticut. So this year, the Sportsmanship Committee enhanced its disqualification rule for coaches. We had a bad year last year in basketball. We had 11 coaches be disqualified, ejected from games, which is 11 too many. We need to go to 0 coaches being ejected from any games at all. So our Sportsmanship Committee enhanced the penalty not only to sit out the next 2 games, but also to take 2 NFHS sportsmanship courses, pay a $50 fine, and all of that has to be done before a coach can coach once again. We had 7 coaches ejected in the fall, which again is 7 coaches too many. Our goal is to make that absolutely 0, not to have a coach ejected ever during our in this case, basketball seasons. And it really is up to the coaches. It's really up to you guys. I mean, I don't think I'm telling you anything you don't know, that the coach is the most seen person during a basketball game. Your kids react how you react. If you go out there screaming like a maniac, screaming at the officials, challenging every call, your kids react the exact same way on the court as you do. The people up in the stands see what you're doing. They react the exact same way. And we have to call an end to this. We have to stop, badgering officials during games and allow them to do their jobs. The other part of that is acting as a role model for your younger coaches, because quite honestly, several of the ejections that we have in our sports that do have ejections, which is only a handful of sports where coaches are ejected, we have younger coaches who are getting ejected from games. And that has to be dealt with by the head coaches. The head coaches have to set that role model, set that example out there of how you act on the court and how you behave on the court and how you interact with officials out on the court. And if we don't do that, those younger officials who are doing their freshman games and JV games don't come back. I mean, the data supports that 100%. They will not come back. They leave after the first year they try officiating, and perhaps we lose what could have been a great official. So again, I'm asking you, last year we brought up the sit a tick policy to try to get kids off the floor very, very quickly after a technical foul, making them sit out for a tick of the clock. And whatever else we can do to try to promote sportsmanship, we are going to do. But I'm telling you, it begins with you, and it begins with how you behave. So I'm asking you to please make this a year where if you feel like maybe this is something that applies to you, because it doesn't apply to everyone, asking you to just do a little self-reflection before this season begins as to how we treat officials and how we treat officials fairly during the course of the game. We're looking forward to a great season. It's climax at Mohegan Sun. We have so many great people doing so many great things on our basketball programs here in the state of Connecticut. But this is something that's just has to happen if we're going to have your children or your grandchildren have an opportunity to play this great game, because we won't have officials in the next 10 years if we don't get this done. I thank you for your attention. Look forward to a great season. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you, Greg. And for those of you that just signed on, that was Greg Simon, our Associate Executive Director and Basketball Liaison for Boys and Girls Basketball. Thank you, Greg. And I'll reintroduce myself. My name is Dan Scavone. I am part of the CIC staff, as well as the Assistant Tournament Director assigning the boys tournament, as Dave Grossman does on the girls' side. I will say that we have Charlene Shepard with us tonight, who is our new state rules interpreter. And Charlene is not new to the role of interpreter. She's been Hartford Board 6 interpreter for the last 3 years, I believe, Charlene? 2 or 3 years? 6 years.
Six.
Wow, that long. Okay, so she's not new to this role. However, we've enhanced her role through the state board. The state board has elected her to lead as our state interpreter, fulfilling the shoes from Charles Harbach, who was did a great job for a number of years from Litchfield Board 7. So Charlie did a great job. He worked with Charlene closely, prepared her for this role, and he's going to do the rules presentation tonight. So I'd like to welcome Charlene.
Thank you very much, Dan and Greg, for having me here tonight. And to all the coaches that are here, thank you for your time and attention. So I'm going to go ahead and get started sharing the screen so that the presentation will come up and you'll be able to follow along with me. All right, so our presentation for this year, obviously, I'm sure many of you have heard about the new rule changes that are coming along, and it starts with faking being fouled. So I want to preface this part of the presentation by simply saying, this rule has been in the rule book since the inception of probably about 84, 85. This is not new. It used to be a player technical foul. So if a player was charged with baiting an official into making a call, it would be charged to that specific player. What we've learned over time is by surveying our officials and by watching games, many of our officials weren't making this call because they were concerned about giving a technical foul, which obviously counts as one of a player's 5 fouls, to a player, especially if it's a really good player for your respective teams. The other reason why sometimes officials don't make a proper ruling is because they're concerned about the foul out or the lashing out from some of our coaches. So this has become a point of emphasis for this year from the National Federation because it is leading to a lot of unfair advantages in the game. Okay, so again, ultimately, what players are doing is they're trying to bait officials into making a call into their favor. And as Greg stated, we want to get back to some semblance of sportsmanship on the court. And so what the Federation decided to do was to take the severe penalty away. And instead of making it a player technical, we're making it a team technical or a bench technical. Which does not go towards any specific player, but it does count towards the team totals. And then subsequently, that leads to either bonus shooting situations, or with the faking being fouled, the first infraction will be a violation. Second infraction or any other subsequent infractions during the game will be a technical foul. All right. So again, it's an administrative procedure. So anytime an official rules a faking being fouled, they have to go report it to the scorer's table like they would for any other type of foul. Okay, so it has to be recorded in the scorebook. First time as an infraction, second time is going to be a team technical. All right, so you will notice when the officials are making these rulings, the first time when they make the ruling, they have to signal it as a warning. And a warning or any type of violation is just stop signal, the open palm. Second or subsequent offense, you'll see the actual foul ruling, and then they will report it as a technical foul. So again, just so that you're mindful of how the officials are going to be reporting it. The first time is for the warning. All subsequent times it's a foul. That's the signal and determination for a foul. So I'm going to go through tonight the 3 types of scenarios that we're going to be using faking being fouled. First is by a dribbler, second is by a shooter, and then the last one is by the defender. All right, so what we're going to be doing for the dribbler and the shooter is pretty similar. What we're going to be doing with the defender is a little bit different. And there are some gray areas with it that we've already, as interpreters, brought back to the attention as the Federation, and they are going to be looking at those loopholes and looking to close them. All right, so first one, faking being fouled by a dribbler. This is generally known as the head bob, and we see this happening all the time. Players dribbling down court, they're being guarded by someone, they throw their head back and act like they just got hit by a Mack truck, and there was no level of contact that occurred that would have allowed that to happen. So again, when we see it happen by a dribbler, the official is going to sound their whistle immediately, and they're going to display the faking being fouled signal, which is just both their hands going down, palms open. Okay, and they're going to remain in that position. We're then going to have that official report the infraction to the scorer's table and then inform the head coach. Okay, then we're going to go back to the point of interruption. All right, so obviously the offense will have the ball. The ball may most likely be in the front court. If the ball is in the front court, it's going to go to one of the 4 throw-in spots in the front court. If it occurs in the back court, then the ball is going to be put into play at the spot closest to where the infraction occurred. Okay, so that's what I just talked about. All right, subsequent infractions, we're going to assess a team technical. Team technicals count towards the team totals for the 5 for each quarter. What we're going to do then is we're going to have someone from the opposing team, any player, shoot the 2 free throws. Then we're going to award the ball to that team for a throw-in at the division line opposite the scorer's table. Because it is a technical foul, there will be no players in the mark lane space because we already know what team is going to be retaining possession after the free throws are taken. All right. Second type of faking being fouled scenario is that by the shooter. So again, we know based on some video that we've watched and games that we've seen, players are kicking out, kind of like that Steph Curry move where they kicking out where they are shooting, or they're going up for a shot coming down and then they're sitting down on their shot. Again, almost as if the defense was not allowing them to land, and that is not the case. So when we have faking being fouled by a shooter, we know that once the shooter releases the ball, there is no longer any player control or team control. So we have to kind of wait to see what happens with the ball. The official is still going to sound their whistle immediately and indicate that it is a faking being fouled. If the ball goes in, we're going to continue. We're going to score the goal. We're going to report the infraction to the scorer's table as we normally would, and the head coach. And then the play is going to be resumed at the point of interruption. Well, what do we normally do after a made basket? We give the ball to the opposing team, and they're allowed to run the end line to get the ball in if they so choose to. Okay. If the try is unsuccessful, again, we know once the shot is released, we don't know what team is going to get the ball unless the ball goes in. If the try is unsuccessful, then the ball becomes dead on the whistle after the shot's taken. And then how do we resume play for point of interruption? We have to go to alternating possession because, again, we don't know which team would have had control of the ball. Again, we report it to the official score. We report it to the head coach. Now, if we are at that 15 foul in that quarter, then we're going to be shooting, or we're going to be having a ball at the throw-in for one of the nearest spots. Okay. If the defensive team gets the ball, because now they're going to be going the other direction, then we're going to have a throw-in in the backcourt spot close to where the infraction occurred. All right. Subsequent infractions, team technical, shooting 2, awarded the ball at the division line for a throw-in. No one in the mark lane spaces. All right. So those are pretty simple, pretty straightforward. This is where it starts to get a little bit quirky. All right. It's when the defender is now faking. All right. So what we don't want to do is when the defender is faking is to blow the whistle immediately, which now prevents the offensive team from potentially scoring. So what we will be doing is if we see a defensive player fake being fouled, the official that sees that is only going to make the gesture, both arms down, palms open, but they're not going to blow the whistle because on that try, the offensive team may get the rebound, could potentially go up for another score, could potentially get fouled during that next play. In fact, they could shoot multiple times at the basket. So we're not going to blow the whistle until either that offensive team scores, the defensive team gets the rebound, or something happens where we have to blow the whistle, either a foul or some type of violation, right? We're going to, again, like I said, display the faking signal immediately, even though we are not blowing the whistle, okay? And then once play is stopped for whatever took place that we needed to sound the whistle for, the official that displayed the faking signal is going to go to the table and report the faking being fouled to the scorer and to the head coach. If the offense happened to score, we resume play, point of interruption, throw in by the opposing team can move along the end line. If no goal was scored, we're going to continue from the point of interruption. So if there was a rebound by the defense, well, the defense is going to get the ball for a throw in, and it's going to be a designated spot throw in. If we happen to have a foul on the play while we're waiting for the faking being fouled, what's stopping the play is the foul. So if we have a foul by the defense, we're still going to report the foul on the defense. We're going to give the ball back to the offense, either for shooting fouls or for a throw in underneath their basket or wherever the foul occurred, and it will go to one of the 4 designated spots. All right. If there's a foul that happens to be by the offense, we're going to report the foul on the offense. We're going to report the faking being fouled. The defense is going to get the ball at the end line or spot closest to where the foul occurred, and which is now their backcourt moving into their front court. All right. Subsequent infractions, again, the official is going to display the signal, but hold their whistle. Okay, we're going to hold the whistle and continue to let the offense do what the offense needs to do as long as the offense is in control of the ball. Okay. And then once the whistle is sound, we're going to display the faking being fouled signal again, because it doesn't go away just because that team may have had the ball for an additional 10, 15, or 20 seconds. Okay. We're going to charge the team technical for the subsequent offense. That foul counts towards the team totals. And then we're going to shoot the 2 free throws, no one in the mark lane spaces. And then they throw in for that team at the division line opposite the scorer's table. All right. So again, I'm going to go through a couple of scenarios that have to do with, well, what happens if the defense is the one that's faking being fouled, which is the last scenario that I talked about. All right. So again, remember, what could be stopping the play is not the faking being fouled. There could be another foul that causes the whistle to actually blow. We're going to report the penalties and administer them in the order the fouls will be reported, and then that we will do them. Okay. So the first foul that the officials are going to report to the scorer's table is the foul that caused the stoppage in play. So whether it's a foul on the defense or a foul on the offense, that's the foul that gets reported first. The second thing that gets reported to the table is the faking being fouled, which is going to be a technical foul. All right. So here's a scenario. Defender B1 fakes being fouled on A1's unsuccessful try. Okay. We don't blow the whistle because A is in control of the ball, and we're going to allow Team A to continue play until there's a stoppage. A4 then gets fouled in the act of shooting by B4. Okay, so how are we going to do this? The official that blew the whistle to stop the play on the foul by B4 is going to go to the table and report the personal foul on B4. The official that made the faking being foul signal, and it could be the same official, is then going to report the faking being fouled, and that's a technical foul because this is a subsequent infraction. All right? Both of the fouls that are reported are going to count towards the team bonus. A4 is going to shoot 2 free throws. with no players in the mark lane space because they were fouled in the act of shooting. Team A can have any player now shoot their 2 free throws for B1 being assessed with the faking being foul, or Team B being assessed for the faking being foul. Any player on Team A can shoot those free throws. Again, no players in the mark lane space. And then Team A is going to get the ball for a throw-in at the division line opposite the scorer's table. All right. So again, first infraction of faking being foul is just simply an infraction. It's reported to the scorer's table and to the head coach for the team that committed that offense. Subsequent infractions will always lead to free throws, no players in the mark lane space, because the team that's shooting is going to retain possession with a throw-in at the division line. All right. All right. So moving on. If you have questions about faking being fouled, you can submit them in the chat room and I'll get to them at the end of the presentation. We have some new instructions to the scorers, which will be going out this year. And again, the Federation made this change in the rule simply, again, to promote some sportsmanship, even at the table. Okay. And what we're doing now is we're basically saying there's a designated scorer at the start of the game. All right. It is up to the person who is the non-official scorer to take it upon themselves to check with the official score end of each quarter, halftime, so on and so forth. If there are any changes, if there are any concerns, hey, I've got 3 fouls on 14, you only have 2 fouls on 14. It is the official scorer's responsibility to alert the officials. All right? So we are putting a little bit more responsibility on the official score because we also want schools to be much more dedicated about who you want in charge of your scorebook. We don't want official scorers distracted by other people sitting at the table, talking with them, or cell phones or anything else. So your official scorer needs to be someone at all levels, freshman, JV, and varsity, that understands the responsibility and what to do with the book. Because if they are designated as the official scorer, they need to make sure that book is on point. The non-official scorer, their responsibility is to check in to make sure, hey, do you have what I have? And if not, the official scorer needs to notify the officials as soon as possible. All right. We have some new signals that are coming out this year. So we had a delayed violation signal, which we use for violations during a free throw. Okay. That has not changed. All right. We also use this signal for anytime a player steps out of bounds and they weren't pushed out of bounds or anything, they went out on their own volition. The official needs to put that delayed violation signal because it will be potentially a violation if the player that went out of bounds comes back in bounds and is first to touch. All right. We have a dual role for our over and back signal. So we usually use this signal for backcourt. We also use this signal for over and back or first to touch as well. Okay. And that's just to signify player has gone out of bounds on their own. Now they've come back in bounds. They're the first to touch. So you may see the delayed violation signal first. Then that player comes back in bounds and is the first to touch. You'll see the second signal, which is that same as the over and back, meaning they were the first to touch the ball when they came back in bounds. All right. So again, just to get you to be familiar with what officials are going to be signaling on the court. All right. That is our signal for faking being fouled or flopping. Again, you'll see the official drop both arms down, straight down in front of them. And unlike the NCAA, our arms are going to stay down. All right. On the collegiate level, you'll see officials go down and then they kind of fan, like telling the player to get up. That's the indication for flopping. We are not doing it that way on the high school side. One, because we don't want collegiate signals and mechanics in the high school game. but we also don't want to be giving the appearance that we're calling a faking being fouled and then telling the player to get up because they don't have to get up. All right, so our signal just goes downward, and it only has to be displayed once until it's time to report it again, and then we're going to display it a second time. All right, but we're not fanning like we're telling the players to get up from the court. All right. All right, in regards to uniform equipment and apparels, again, we've added some changes to how we're going to be addressing issues so that we want our officials to be mindful of gender, ethnic, racial, religious differences and be sensitive to them. But we also want the conversations that take place between officials and coaches to be sensitive. Our officials have been told, based on this new rule change, that we are not to directly address players. If there are any issues with uniforms, equipment, or apparel, the officials are to go directly to the head coach, report the issue to the head coach, and then it is the head coach's responsibility to make the adjustment. So if we have a game where there is a crew of 3, the R and one of the umpires will go have a conversation with the head coach while the third umpire remains on the court, because it is during warm-ups when we notice this stuff, and continue to monitor warm-ups. Right? If it happens to be in a crew of 2, both officials are going over, but one official is going to turn so that they can keep their eyes on the court and monitor warm-ups. But they still need to be there to be close enough to hear the conversation to ensure that the necessary information is being reported to the head coach. All right. So again, we're going to be addressing this issue in pregame as soon as we notice these violations, if we can notice them in pregame. And we are going to be sending both officials to address the issue with the head coaches. And again, if there are any subsequent issues about how it's communicated, so on and so forth, please reach out to your local interpreter, or as my official role as a state interpreter, you can send me an email as well, and we'll see how we can get the issue resolved. All right. In regards to apparels, the Skylar Diggin headband, as we refer to it on the officiating side, it's illegal. Doesn't matter if the player tucks the tails in, that headband is illegal. Okay, so we don't want knots tied in the back of their head to pull the flags up. We don't want them tucking it under. It doesn't matter what they do. That type of headband is illegal. All right, and we are strictly having our officials enforce not having this. I can actually say last year was probably the best year that we've had in terms of headbands, armbands, wrist sleeves, arm sleeves, all that kind of stuff. Okay, so again, just as a reminder to let your players know, if they're going to get a headband, just get one that slides right down over their heads. It is illegal to tuck their shorts. And again, we're getting away from that just simply because, again, we know that the players mimic what they see on the higher levels. However, the Federation is trying to do their best to maintain some integrity on the high school side. We don't want players tucking their shorts up into their compressions. We also don't want them pulling them up so high that sometimes we are seeing inappropriate things. So the whole reason for us doing this is to make sure we're not putting anyone in an inappropriate situation where now we have to address something. And we have players saying, well, I'm comfortable with this, or coaches saying, well, my player's okay. We're trying to make sure that we're not putting anyone else in an uncomfortable situation. All right. Head decorations. We made this rule adjustment 2 years ago. We do realize that culturally and ethnically and racially that players do put adornments into their hair. And we have looked at ways that which players can wear beads or shells or other things in their hair that would keep them safe and other players safe. So in essence, if the adornment is woven into the hair where it can't move around, meaning the bead or the shell, as you can see in the first 3 pictures, then we're leaving it alone. The player is allowed to have the adornment in their hair. In the 4th picture, as you can see, The beads are at the end of the hair. Now, the officials can't tell the player they have to take the beads out. What they have to tell the player, technically the coach, is that they have to secure their hair in a way that those beads will not be swinging around that can injure that player or another player. So we should not have officials telling you that the player has to take their beads out. If anyone is telling you that, please let me know. Right? But the player can go secure their hair, whether it's by 1 elastic band, 2 elastic bands, 12, whatever they need to do to secure those beads, they can do that. All right? Head coverings, again, for religious reasons, they can't be hard, they can't be abrasive. Okay? And they have to fit snugly to the player's heads. All right? But again, we're not having players remove anything. They don't need a doctor's note or any kind of note from their religious authority that says they can wear it. It just has to be snug to their head. All right? Headbands, up to 3 inches wide, which is how most headbands are made. Some aren't, as you can see in the second picture. Under Armour makes theirs very thin. Okay, so that would be illegal. And it would also be illegal because it has too many logos on it. Okay, so the Skylar Diggin headband is illegal. Again, most of our manufacturers understand what players can wear on all the levels, so they manufacture their goods so that players are actually going to buy them. All right. And again, headbands can only have one logo on it. All right. Any type of headwear that is worn for medical reasons, such as a concussion headband or anything of the such, we do have to have a doctor's note for that. My suggestion to you as coaches, if you know you're going to have a player that's going to be wearing something like that, make a copy of the doctor's note, tape it to the front of your scorebook so that when the officials ask about it, you can tell them that's where it is. You don't have to be fishing around for it. All right. Again, as officials, we're not allowed to read the note and say, well, that's not a pediatrician, that's an orthopedist. It doesn't matter. Okay. Our officials have been instructed, as long as there's a physician statement that says the player can wear that, we accept that letter as is. All right, so please make sure your players have one and that you have one available every game that player wears it. You can't say, well, they wore it Tuesday night and they didn't say anything. You need to have the documentation. It's a liability thing for us as officials and for you and your players as well. All right. Hair control devices. Again, elastic bands, cloth bands, they're fine. Can't be anything that's hard or abrasive. Has to go around the hair. Can't have beads or anything on the ends of it. All right. So again, just being mindful of trying to make sure we're keeping our players safe. If your players determine that they would like to wear undershirts under their team jerseys, everyone on the team that is wearing an undershirt, they all have to be the same color. Now, if somebody wants to wear short sleeves and another player wants to wear long sleeves, that is fine. What they can't do is they can't rip sleeves so that there's jagged edges. Okay, so they have to wear the undershirt the way they purchased it. And again, the undershirt can only have one visible logo. The other thing they can't do is they can't wear the t-shirt where if it's a long sleeve t-shirt, one sleeve is long and the other sleeve is short. That would be deemed illegal. Okay, so again, however they purchase the shirt, that's how it has to be worn. All right. Headbands, wristbands, arm and leg sleeves, compression shorts or tights have to be a single solid color, white, black, beige, or the predominant color of the jersey you're wearing that night. So if you're at home and you're wearing white, they can wear white accessories. If you're on the road and you're wearing red, they can wear red accessories. They cannot be tiger prints, rainbow, camouflage. Okay, if we can see them as officials, they have to remove that article of clothing. Okay, it's not legal. All right, and again, everyone on your team that's wearing any of those items, it all has to be the same color. All right, so you can't have one player with white and then the next player with blue. You have to determine what color you're wearing that night. So again, make sure all your players go out at the same time and purchase whatever they're going to purchase. All right. New change made this year. When you are wearing your white home jerseys, the undershirts also have to be white. Okay. If you are wearing your visiting jerseys, the undershirts have to be a color similar to the color of your jersey, or they can be black. Okay, because we do recognize that some schools have some colors. You can't find purple, or you can't find a certain color green or a certain color yellow. Okay, so if everybody on the team is wearing yellow and they're wearing a black t-shirt, that is fine. Okay, but as you can see in the third photo, you can't be wearing yellow and then have on a white t-shirt. That's illegal. Okay, so again, the jersey, the undershirt has to be similar in color, close enough. So if you're wearing a Kelly green, it can't be a neon green t-shirt underneath. Has to be either Kelly green or black. All right. Schools are allowed to have a memorial patch. It can't be a number. So again, we don't want to be confusing officials. Someone's wearing number 44, but has number 24 on the memorial patch. So it can be a name, it can be a mascot, it can be in anything, but it can't be a number. Manufacturer logos, again, you're probably getting your jerseys however you buy them. Again, Nike, Adidas, Under Armour, all of them, they know what the rules are and they make sure that they are meeting the manufacturer's responsibility for jerseys in terms of there only being one logo. Right? This year, we changed the rules to recognize that if a school decides they don't want to have Bulldogs written across their jersey and want to put the school logo, which is a bulldog, on their jersey, that is still fine. Okay, so again, we do realize that some things trickle down from the higher levels, and we're not going to prevent schools from being able to purchase what they'd like to purchase. All right. Bottoms. Now, again, this is to align once again with racial or ethnic or gender sensitive issues, religious issues. If a player wants to wear shorts, skirts, which is a skirt with shorts underneath, culottes, long pants, as long as the uniform bottoms are similar in color to the jersey, they are allowed to wear that. Okay? So we are not checking why does one player on your team have on long pants and everybody else has shorts. Doesn't matter. As long as if you're wearing red, the bottoms that they're wearing have to be red. All right. And again, as you can see, it says like colored. So you can't be wearing red and wear pink. That's not like. All right. Again, no questions, no paperwork or documentation needed. We're trying to be sensitive of everyone's needs. All right. Religious and medical alert items. So again, religious items and medical items are not considered jewelry in the rule book. Okay. If a player is wearing a religious item around their neck, a cross, some kind of medallion that they've had blessed or whatever, they are allowed to wear it, but it has to be taped down so it's not constantly coming out from underneath their jersey. All right. If they are wearing anything around their wrist, okay, it also has to be taped. If it's something medical, we want it to be visible. We need to see the alert part. So again, if we have someone that may be diabetic or is allergic to peanuts, we need to be able to see that. So if we have to have someone respond, they don't have to be spending time trying to pull the tape off the part of the medical alert that has the necessary information. Now, in regards to all other jewelry, illegal. No tape, no Band-Aids. Okay? Doesn't matter if it's in their ear, in their nose, in their mouth, in their belly button. If we can see it, it has to come out. Or belly button, tuck your jersey. Because obviously, unless it's a stud, they probably can't get it out if it's a hoop. Okay? Players cannot play with earrings or jewelry taped unless it's religious or medical. Please don't have your players start saying that their new earrings they got for Christmas are medically related. Okay, they're gonna have to come off. All right, has to come off. All right, braces, any type of brace worn on elbow, shoulder, knee, those are medical devices. Again, officials cannot tell players that they have to tape over them because they have a metal piece or a hinge and it could cut somebody. We can't alter any type of medical device. Right, so again, these types of braces don't have any color restrictions on them either. All right, so again, nothing that you should be having officials address you about. There are no restrictions on shoes and socks. There are restrictions on the collegiate level, but not on the high school level. Okay, so if a kid wants to wear one red sneaker and one blue sneaker with yellow socks, have at it. Okay, I get emails all the time from officials about when are we going to change? Like, I don't care. Like, you're going to have to be dizzy for an hour, but you're going to be all right. There are no restrictions on shoes and socks. All right. Wristbands have to be absorbent. All right. Made of a soft material. Players can only wear one on their arm, and because it is a wristband, it has to be worn on their wrist. They can't wear it up above their elbow to accentuate their biceps. Looks great, but we're not marketing. So it has to be worn on their wrist because that is how it is intended. All right. Last but not least, down at the bottom, again, the player on the left is illegal because her headband is white. Her leg sleeves, which are knee pads, are black. Have to match. Okay. The leg sleeve on the next player, the logo's too big, can't wear it. Logo on the arm sleeve, too big, can't wear it. And then the arm sleeve and the leg sleeves aren't matching. So as I said before, kids see their favorite players wearing something, they go and grab it. Can't wear it, right? The silicone bands, what would Jesus do? All that stuff, can't wear them. They're illegal, right? So the player on the right, the far right, is in a legal tire. Everything she has on is by the book. White uniform, matching top and bottom, headband, black with one manufacturer's logo, leg sleeves, which are the knee pads, also black and matching. Okay, this is what we want to see from our players in any game, in every game, all season. Right? All right, new rule and reminder for this year. This was instituted 3 years ago. We gave all the schools a moratorium to have an opportunity to get their new uniforms ordered. The uniform jersey number has to contrast the actual color of the jersey. So you can't buy white uniforms anymore with white numbers. Can't buy gray uniforms with gray numbers. They have to have contrasting colors. That is mandatory this year. All right, so if you are not in compliance with this, you need to be contacting your local interpreter right now to let them know. Okay, because again, this rule was instituted 3 years ago, and we gave schools 3 years to get up to par with getting uniforms ordered so that they would be in compliance. All right. Another new rule this year, wide stances on screening. So this came about after the whole UConn semifinal game. And a lot of questions came about that and whether or not her wide stance impeded the play, impeded the defender, so on and so forth. So the National Federation went back and started thinking about how are players actually setting screens and whether or not those screens are actually impacting the offense from being able to naturally do what they need to do, as well as the defense being able to naturally do what they need to do. What they have decided is this, okay? If the contact is on the screener's torso, then the screen is going to be deemed legal, right? And I'm going to show you a picture of this in a second. If the contact is below the torso, so below the belly button, impeding the defender from being able to move, then we have a foul. So this is what it looks like. Okay, so we have a player here in red setting a screen. Notice how wide his stance is. Previous years, his stance needed to be within the same vertical plane as his shoulders. Okay, but his stance is wide and the contact by the defender, white, is made on the torso. So this year, we are deeming this to be a legal screen, no whistle, right? Here's the same screen being set 15 blue. Again, very wide stance, but notice where the contact is being made. It's being made below the torso in the leg area, okay? And it's going to impede 23 white from being able to maintain his defensive stance and pressure on the ball handler. This is where we're going to get the whistles this year. All right, so again, we're no longer looking at the stance unless there's impediment below the torso. As long as it's in the torso, fine. All right. As a reminder for our player stepping out of bounds, which I mentioned before, a player can step out of bounds without penalty, okay? As long as they're not the first one to touch the ball when they return in bounds. If they are the first to touch the ball, because you cannot legally defend someone who's out of bounds. That's why we've made it a violation. All right? So for those plays where we're setting screens on the end line and the player is running out of bounds to get an advantage, we're going to display the delayed whistle signal, arm straight out to the side with a clenched fist. If that player is not the first one to touch the ball, we just drop the signal. If they are the first to touch, we then signal hand up violation, first to touch. Okay, so again, you'll see both of those signals being demonstrated. Okay, so that's the first signal that you're going to see. We're going to delay the whistle because we know they're out of bounds, and then we will do the motion for first to touch if they do that. As Dan stated before, the CAS-CIAC policy is still in effect, meaning that anytime a player receives a technical foul, that player must be immediately removed from the game. Okay, a timeout does not preclude them to come back into the game. If we're at the end of a quarter when the technical is fouled, they can't start the next quarter because the clock has not started. Okay, so it's absolutely imperative we understand that player is not coming back in the game until that clock has moved again, even if it's just 1 second. All right. Now, if the technical foul occurs at the end of the game, we don't carry that over to the next game. All right, so just to be aware of that. All right. Reminders about the shot clock. We're still playing with the shot clock, 35-second, and it must be visible on both ends of the court. Shot clock operator needs to be seated at the scorer's table and should be seated next to the timer. Okay. All schools should have an alternative shot clock device, whether it's something that we're going to count by hand, whether it's an iPhone, whatever it is, you have to have an alternative device ready to go in case your shot clocks malfunction. Okay. Again, our shot clock signal to the left is for a shot clock violation, meaning a team has not released the ball on an attempt on the score, try for goal before the shot clock period has ended. Or if an official kind of does a circle in the air, they're simply saying to reset the shot clock. And again, Connecticut rules, there's no partial resets. So if we're having a reset, it's a full reset back to 35 seconds. All right. We turn off the shot clock when there's less time on the game clock than there would be on the shot clock. So if there's 33 seconds on the game clock, obviously there's 35 seconds on the shot clock. We don't need the shot clock. The officials at that point should have a visible 10-second backcourt count anytime that ball is going from backcourt to front court. Okay, as long as we don't have a shot clock on. All right. If one or both of the shot clocks malfunction, if one shot clock malfunctions, we're going to continue play. Okay. If both shot clock happen to malfunction, then like I said, we're immediately going to the backup or alternative device. So please make sure you have that accessible in case we need it. Don't put it in the closet where whoever has the keys is gone for the night. Make sure it's accessible and available so that we can keep the game going. All right. New rule this year. Federation gave it back to each state. Connecticut did decide to adopt that this year for closely guarded. If a player is holding the ball we will still have a visible, closely guarded count if the defender is within 6 feet of the ball handler. We will no longer be having a visible, closely guarded count if the player is dribbling. Okay, so we are now mirroring the NCAA rule with this. So a player holding the ball, you will still see the count. Player dribbling, if they want to dribble the whole shot clock, have at it. All right, so again, we adopted the rule change for this year. All right, what other Connecticut mechanics do we have? Again, by rule for Connecticut, it is the responsibility of the home team to mark the coaching boxes if they're not already marked on your court. Okay? If the home team refuses to comply with this, then the home team coach cannot use their coaching box that game. That means the head coach of the home team has to sit. It means their assistant coaches do as well. The visiting team will be allowed to still use their coaching box area. All right. And we let our officials know that they have to notify us, because if we have repeated issues with schools, we're removing them from the ability to be considered for our sportsmanship award. We're also going to be notifying the CIAC, because again, it is an adopted rule here in Connecticut. All right. By rule in Connecticut, we have also adopted that we're going to have a head coach and captain's meeting around the 12-minute mark. Okay, or as soon as the referee is done with the scorebook and the table personnel, making sure everything is all set to go. If the head coach decides that they do not want to attend the meeting, because some of you do, it is okay if you send an assistant coach, but you have to send someone from your coaching staff to be part of the captain coach's meeting. Obviously, we'd prefer it be the head coach. That way, if you have any questions, you can ask at that time. But please know, if your assistant coach goes to the meeting, you can't then claim during the game, well, I didn't know about that. You are responsible from getting any information from your assistant coach. All right. And again, our officials have to notify us if the head coach is refusing to attend. All right. Our officials will point to the floor with one finger. That is our standard mechanic here in Connecticut. That is just to let the official scorer know that a player may have been behind the three-point arc, but before they released the ball, their foot touched the line. That signal indicates that that is now a 2-point field goal if it is scored. And oftentimes, again, you will see officials, if the ball goes in, they will point to the scorer's table and signify 2. All right. Pre-game warm-ups, when you guys are announcing your starting lineups, teams are not allowed to congregate at the division line or at the center circle, even if you are the home team. Okay, and again, it is just so that we don't want to have any issues with sportsmanship before we even have our initial jump ball. All right. All right, with that being said, that's the presentation for tonight. All right. Are there any questions? I will look.
We have a couple, but just before I get into the questions,
Sure.
can you just go over? They have 20 seconds now to a bleeding player
Yes.
to fix that,
Yep.
and also, if the official beckons a coach on the floor with an injured player, regardless of the coach entering the floor, they still have to be removed from the game.
Yes. Thank you for reminding me of those. So, rule change for this year. If we have a player that is bleeding, we will stop the game. We will notify the coach or whoever that the player is bleeding. We will then have the timer start a 20-second interval. If you can have the blood issue rectified by the end of the 20 seconds, that player can come back into the game without penalty. Okay? If the blood situation is not rectified by the end of the 20 seconds, the coach needs to either call a timeout or replace the player. Okay? So you don't get officials time to rectify that. We're giving you 20 seconds. At the end of the 20 seconds, if the bleeding is not stopped, you either have to call a timeout because you want to get that player back in, or simply sub. But at the end of the 20 seconds, you need to have that decision made. Otherwise, it's considered a delay of game. All right. In terms of injuries, we have a player on the court goes down. We stop the game. Once we stop the game and we beckon the coach onto the court, whether the coach comes or not, that player has to leave the game. Okay, so same thing applies. You want the player to come back in the game? Call a timeout. Okay. If the injury is resolved at the end of the timeout, the player can come back into the game without question. Okay. If the player comes back into the game and appears to still be injured, the official may stop again and say, Coach, you might want to check 12 white. Okay. And we'll do the same thing with concussions. Coach, it appears that 12 white may be exhibiting some symptoms of a concussion. Right. It is your responsibility as a coach to make sure that player is well enough to come back into the game. If you deem the player is well enough, again, the player comes back in and appears to still be exhibiting signs or symptoms of a concussion, we may stop the game again and say, Coach, you might want to check 12 white again. Okay, so bleeding, we will give you 20 seconds. And then if the bleeding is not resolved, timeout or immediate substitution.
Great.
Injured player on the court, we beckon whether you walk out or not. Once we do this signal, we're in essence saying that player has to go. Okay, so it's not optional. You can't say, well, I didn't come on the court. Beckoning means we stop the game, the player has to be removed. Okay, and we changed that so that players aren't forcing us to stop the game and then saying, ref, I'm good after they've been on the floor for a minute. Okay, so that player has to leave the game. You want the player back in, you now have to call a timeout. All right.
I'll read the questions for you,
Sure.
Charlene, and then you can address them. First of all, the most common question. Yes, as I stated earlier, this meeting has been recorded. It'll be posted on the boys and girls main basketball page of our website. It's probably as early as tomorrow, maybe the next day. But it'll be on there, so refer to it as needed. Next question. I can actually handle this one for you, Charlene. Why did the closely guarded rule change? What's the rationale? This was actually a change that was submitted by Connecticut.
Yes.
So as a state, we submitted this rule adoption option, and it was looked favorably around the country. It was something that was probably, a logical step. You saw it in the NCAA level. With a shot clock, there's no need for closely guarded while dribbling.
Right.
And the rationale is you're going to maintain the appropriate pace of play. That's the rationale. Yep. With 35-second clock, the pace of play is not going to change. And quite honestly, and Charlene, you could jump in here. And as a former basketball official myself, I can tell you that it was a very difficult point of contention in terms of the closely guarded rule. Are you in an appropriate defensive position within 6 feet? As the players move out of one primary area from one official into another, it was a state of confusion. This was always a subject of contention between coaches and officials.
Right.
I think most people would say they wish it wasn't even there without the shot clock. However, in that case, you can get a real big advantage with a real good ball handler. But now you're not going to have a strong advantage when you have a 35-second clock. And probably, I don't want to jump too far ahead, but probably the next step down the road might be, the 20-second reset on an offensive rebound. Some states are going to that, but we need to, fully absorb our shot clock process before we even discuss that. But I can see that proposal coming down the road, and that would logically follow, along with this 5-second closely guarded. So, Charlene, you want to add anything to that?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, I think we're trying to stay in alignment with what's going on around the country. And ultimately, I think what it came down to is most of our officials either don't want to count or are inappropriately applying the rules. So oftentimes I've gone to games to evaluate, and I've seen a defender within 3 feet of the ball handler, and the officials are doing this, saying that they're not closely guarded. And I'm like, how much closer would you like them to get? So I think we don't want to be penalizing the defense. And so we know that if a player is holding the ball, more often than not, the defense will come out a little bit closer to kind of force them to dribble. And then once they are now dribbling, they kind of got them where they want them to go, or do whatever they need to do. So again, as Dan said, I think it just is in alignment with what we want to do at basketball and get the players to be able to play and use the 35-second shot clock, and taking closely guarded dribbling away is not going to impede on anything that you're doing in your offensive sets.
Thank you. You got a bunch of praise comments, Charlene. You did a great job tonight. But the next question, rolling the shorts at the waistband, legal or not?
Rolling the shorts at the waistband is fine. We do realize that not all of your kids can fit the uniforms that you assign to them. The only restriction that comes with rolling the waistband, one, you have to make sure the strings stay in so that players' fingers can't get caught. The other thing that you have to be mindful of is if you happen to have shorts that have the manufacturer's logo inside and they roll their shorts only once, well, we're going to see Under Armour or Nike all around the shorts. So remember, we can only see one manufacturer's logo on each piece of apparel. So they might have to roll their shorts twice. But that's the only restriction with that. We got them away from that because, again, like I said, we know that when you're passing out uniforms, your varsity team's getting it first, then your JV, then your freshman. So you got a kid that's $110 wearing an extra large uniform, and those shorts aren't going to stay up without suspenders. So the kids are rolling them up and they're pulling them tight, and we're okay with that. So let them roll them. All right.
Next question, what is the language around a three-point shooter in a landing space? Is it a foul or not?
Okay, so anytime a shooter, doesn't have to be a three-point shooter, anytime a shooter leaves the floor, they are entitled to the vertical space from where they left all the way up to the ceiling if that's where they can go. The defense is also entitled to their vertical space, all the way up, all the way down, okay? So what officials should be doing is, if I have a shooter and I have a defender, I should be watching the shooter when they go up to ensure that the defender does now not encroach on their vertical plane so that when the offensive player lands, there's nowhere for them to land. Okay, so that is something that we are working on our officials with, because we need them to understand if there's no space and the offensive player can't come down without making contact with the defense, then we have a blocking foul. That's not a flop. Okay, so again, we're working very strongly with our officials to make sure that they're not calling a flop because a player came down, hit the defense that's in their vertical plane, and now hit the ground, and now I'm getting all of these. Okay, because I already know what's going to happen. I'm going to get 842 video clips. Okay, so again, we have been working very closely with our officials. My next board meeting for Board 6 is December 15th. We're going to be going through faking being fouled again. We're trying to drill this home because we know it is going to be an issue this season. So we want to make sure our officials are seeing plays and well-versed on understand when they're applying the faking rule versus when they're just calling an actual foul.
Okay, and then next one is, are there any uniform restrictions for a player on JV that wears a varsity uniform as long as the colors are the same?
No, as long as the colors are the same. So again, if you happen to be wearing red and your varsity uniforms have a bulldog on it, but the JV uniforms actually say bulldog, fine. Okay, you're fine.
We're sensitive to the budgets of schools, and it's always been freshman JV level at using the hand-me-downs, and
right,
we're still in that mode.
Right.
Question, press break on dead ball situation. Many college and high school teams are setting up all out of bounds or 4 out of 5 players out of the baseline. Almost very similar to football play, running routes. Ruling about that, what's legal and illegal?
So we keep going back and forth with this. I'm trying to think off the top of my head where we last landed. I think Charlie is on this call. Charlie, if you're on the call, can you unmute yourself and kind of refresh my memory as to where we landed with 5 players out of bounds on the press?
Yeah, that can only be done after a made basket.
Okay. That's what I thought.
It can't be done on a violation where the ball's being put in play on one of those 2 spots, those 3-foot spots outside the lane lines. Can only be done after a made basket. And they need to get the ball back in play within the 5-second count.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, and then going back to the rolling of the shorts, and the question is, will it create the same visual inappropriateness that we're trying to avoid?
Again, if they're rolling the shorts to make sure that they can fit, there's no reason why the shorts should end up in their mid-thigh. And again, I would have your players try their uniforms on so that you can see what they're going to look like, because if that's going to be the case, you should be asking that player to get some kind of compression shorts or something to wear underneath. Again, we're trying not to make players feel self-conscious, because we do realize that's an issue. We also don't want our officials feeling self-conscious because they're seeing stuff and then they're feeling like, well, should I say something because I'm a male official and it's a female player? We don't want to get into that. So please make sure that your players can be properly equipped as best as possible.
Great, I think that's it. And Charlie, all these years, you got off the hook easy. I mean, there were so many rule changes this year. You picked a good time to step away. But you can see, folks, how well Charlene and Charlie work along with the other interpreters as well. So why don't I announce the other interpreters as well? Charlie's board 7, the Litchfield area. Charlene, board 6, Hartford area. Steve Wodarski is the interpreter in the New Haven area. And Glenn Colello, the interpreter over in the Fairfield County area. Mike Thomas is the interpreter on the Eastern Board 8, and Ben Wakely, the interpreter on the Northeast Board 35. As Charlene said before, if you have a question, a rules interpretation needed, contact your local interpreter first. Okay, stay with your local interpreter. And if there's still indecision about the answer there, we can get the state interpreter, get Charlene involved, and she can work with that local interpreter to help you out. That's the protocol. Okay, so having said that, it's 7:40. It's been a great presentation, Charlene. Thank you.
My pleasure.
This is recorded again, and it'll be on the basketball main page of the boys and girls main page of our website. Thank you all, and have a great season.